Everyone deserves a little comfort during their final days. That's why animals have been part of hospice care for years. They offer much-needed emotional support when people are at their most vulnerable. But when Oscar the cat arrived at a care home, he didn't seem interested in helping anyone. At first, he kept his distance from the residents. Still, over time, he ended up making a deeper impact than any doctor or nurse ever had. He had a strange gift that no one could explain. That's what one doctor from Brown University discovered when he decided to study Oscar. And the results truly shook him. It all started back in 2005 when Oscar was brought to Steerhouse Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Rhode Island. Of course, cats don't usually have jobs, but this was more like a trial run. Along with 5 other cats, he was adopted to bring comfort to patients living with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and other serious illnesses that made everyday life confusing and difficult. At first, Oscar didn't stand out. Actually, he wasn't like the others at all. He didn't seem interested in being around people. He didn't cuddle, didn't purr on laps. He kept his distance. Oscar wasn't a fan of attention. He'd hiss loudly if someone tried to pick him up, and he never showed much affection toward the residents. He preferred to keep to himself. Sometimes he'd go missing for hours, and nurses would later find him tucked under a bed, hiding in a storage closet, or leaping across the bookshelves in the recreation room. The center had used therapy dogs before, but this was their first time trying cats. Staff weren't sure what to expect, but figured it was worth a shot. Steerhouse had a strong reputation. It was one of the top facilities in the area. Doctors often came there to run studies and test treatments. That's exactly what Dr. David Dova was doing when Oscar first showed up. At the time, he had no idea this little cat would leave such a lasting mark on his life. David already knew most of the staff well. He was always respectful and focused, mostly keeping to himself and his work. He spent his days talking with patients and gathering data, not one for small talk. When he did speak up, he preferred to stick to science and facts, not feelings or beliefs. That year, David was studying dementia, trying to find ways to slow down memory loss. Steerhouse was the perfect place for his research. It had a special unit just for dementia patients, and everything was designed to meet their needs. He had full access to the tools and staff insights he needed, nurses who worked closely with patients in their final days, who knew how different people reacted to treatment. Oscar arrived about a year into David's research, along with 5 other cats. David didn't pay much attention at first. His work wasn't about animal therapy, but he was curious to see how the patients would respond. Most of them enjoyed having the animals around, even if a few, like Oscar, weren't exactly friendly. Still, Oscar had more going on than just a standoffish attitude. Underneath his cold behavior, something unusual was starting to show, and the staff began to catch on after about a year. Even though Oscar normally avoided people, there were certain times when he would suddenly stick close to someone. And if you knew anything about Oscar, you knew he didn't do anything by accident. At first, no one thought much of it. One day he'd be curled up with one patient, the next day with someone else. But slowly, a strange pattern started to emerge. He only seemed to stay with people who were nearing the end of their lives. Oscar would often choose to sit beside a patient, and within just hours, that person would pass away. At first, the nurses thought it had to be just a strange coincidence. David, especially, pushed back. He told them there had to be a reasonable explanation. But as the pattern kept repeating, it started to feel more and more eerie. Oscar had already predicted around 30 deaths before David decided he couldn't ignore it anymore. Word spread beyond just the staff. People in the community started to hear about the cat who knew when it was time. David finally decided it was time to investigate properly. If Oscar really could sense when someone was dying, then David needed to prove it with facts. He was a scientist after all, and part of him believed there had to be something else going on. Maybe the nurses were unknowingly giving off cues when a patient's health started to fade. Or maybe people just remembered the times Oscar was right and forgot the times he wasn't. David was ready to put it to the test. He started an experiment, carefully setting up a way to track Oscar's behavior and remove as many outside influences as possible. He watched closely. Within just a couple of weeks, Oscar sat quietly next to 2 different patients. one in a wheelchair, the other bedridden. And within hours, both had passed. David kept digging, and the more data he collected, the clearer it became. By the time his study was done, Oscar had correctly predicted over 20 deaths in a row. David submitted his findings to a respected medical journal, and it was accepted. His theory was that humans might release some kind of chemical as they approached death, something Oscar could smell or sense, but no one really knew for sure. While David focused on finding a scientific reason, others were convinced there was more to it. Maybe Oscar had some kind of sixth sense, or maybe, just maybe, he was the one guiding people gently from one world to the next. David didn't buy into the more mystical explanations, but even he had a hard time completely brushing them off. Oscar's ability wasn't just a rumor anymore, it was backed by data. It became so reliable that the staff began watching Oscar closely. If he curled up beside a patient, they would call the family right away. His quiet presence gave countless families one last moment to say goodbye, something they might have otherwise missed. Locals started calling him the Angel of Death, both respected and feared. Eventually, Oscar made headlines across the country, with news stations and articles covering the strange cat who seemed to know when someone's time had come. Nobody wanted a visit from him, but deep down, his presence became a small comfort. Many of the patients at Steerhouse had no family left, and even when loved ones did come, memory loss made it hard to truly connect. But Oscar didn't need to be remembered. He didn't need anyone to know who he was. He simply showed up and stayed close, quietly offering comfort in a way no human could. He'd lie beside them until their final breath, then gently walk away, as if sensing that his job there was done. He made sure no one had to leave this world alone. Sometimes, if a family didn't want him in the room, Oscar would resist. He'd scratch at the door, meow, even hiss, like he had to be there. And honestly, it felt like he did. But even the Angel of Death couldn't stay forever. After 17 years and hundreds of lives touched, Oscar passed away. There was no one to predict his own final moments, but somehow he seemed to know. He spent them surrounded by the nurses and doctors who had become his family, including David. It was a quiet goodbye for a cat who once didn't even want to be near people. But he ended up changing more lives than anyone ever expected. If you ask anyone who had a loved one at Steerhouse over the years, chances are Oscar was part of their story. Thanks for watching this unforgettable tale. If it touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who'd appreciate it. And if you're hungry for more amazing stories, head over to the channel. There's plenty more waiting for you.
If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider sharing it with someone who may find it interesting. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.